Did you know that on average, I listen to 10 hours of podcasts a week? And I've been doing this for many years. The reason is because it's so efficient. You can dive into the lives of a single person or a single idea, and if you like it, you dive in a bit deeper. That's exactly why in this week's episode of Master Talk, I'm going to be sharing the 3 best podcasts that I listen to almost religiously. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Brendan from Master Talk here, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. Today we're talking about podcasts and my favorites, so let's get into it. A quick word on podcasts before I give out my recommendation. What I want you to do with these amazing tools to learn is 2 things. The first one is it'll help you listen better in conversations. Since you're essentially tuning into a conversation that's happened in the past, you can't really reply to it. So you have to spend the full hour, the full 30 minutes, taking notes and listening into what's happening in the show. And this will enhance your listening skills. So for that reason alone, in the context of public speaking, I highly recommend you check out podcasts. The second thing is the way that I essentially choose the podcasts I listen to, especially for interviewer-led podcasts where someone is interviewing someone else. I always like to focus on the interviewer, not the interviewee. So the host of the podcast is actually more important than the guest because it's the host that extracts all the right information and is the person who is introducing you to the best people in their network because they bring on the best guests that they know. So when you think about podcasts, especially if it's an interview, don't just look at the content or the guests, really spend some time looking at the interviewer himself or herself. So with that said, let's get into my favorite podcast. Number 1, Lewis Howes' School of Greatness. Lewis is an amazing interviewer, and I think what I love about him is in his podcast, he shares a lot of lessons from all areas of life. So it's not just about business, it's about health, relationships, wealth, you name it. He brings Olympians, he brings the top minds in the business world to teach us what it is to be great. But what's special about him is the way and how he interviews people. His most famous interview is actually the one that he did with Kobe Bryant, which was one of his last interviews. He was able to get Kobe to talk about different aspects of his life that he normally doesn't talk about, like love, affection, and intimacy. So I've always been a fan of Lewis's because he's always giving me new insights from the same exact person that I can't get from any other person who has interviewed that guest. And that is the special secret sauce of Lewis. Another thing that I'll point out is that his event, Summit of Greatness, brings together a lot of amazing like-minded individuals who want to connect, who want to be a part of building something great. So that's also an event I go to every year that I enjoy. So check out Lewis's podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. Number 2, Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. Reid is the founder of LinkedIn, which is a social media network, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And obviously he had a very successful run with the company. What's great about him is despite the wealth and the financial success he's had, he's put it upon himself to share a lot of the insights that he's learned through all of the years that he's ran LinkedIn, but also because of the quality of the guests that he's met in his life, he's able to bring on amazing people. So you can imagine that his guest list is extremely impressive. We're talking about the founders of Airbnb, Slack, and all these big honchos in the tech space, or really any space. And also my personal favorite, Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water. So a lot of these amazing and incredible individuals go on Reid's podcast to share their story. And what I love about his podcast specifically is every single episode is a work of art. It's not just an interview. It starts with a cool story. He wraps it in really well. And each line item, each number has a theme that he argues in that episode. So for instance, in his episode, The Beauty of a Bad Idea, he talks about the importance of having people disagree with you and say that you're crazy. I mean, think about it. When you think about Airbnb, if I told you 15 years ago that you were going to sleep in strangers' houses and pay them for it, you probably would have called me a bit crazy. And yet, Airbnb has become a very successful business because a lot of people actually wanted the service. That's also true with Master Talk. A lot of people told me I was crazy to start a YouTube channel on public speaking. That's never been done before. It's not popular. It's not going to work. So that's the lesson I got from Beauty of a Bad Idea. And from each of these episodes, you'll learn something very specific that you can apply, especially if you're someone who wants to build something very important in the world. And number 3, Impact Theory by Tom Bilyeu. Tom's an awesome guy. So he's a founder of Quest Nutrition. He essentially created Quest bars. It's a nutrition bars that's been sold to millions of people around the world. And he has a podcast where he shares a lot of the best insights from amazing guests that he brings onto the show. And much like Lewis, Tom is so great at interviewing. Despite all of the success he's had in his life, he spends on average 10 hours per guest really analyzing every single moment of their life. He's so good at interviewing that when he interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk, which is someone who's very successful in the social media landscape, even Gary was shocked at how good Tom knew him. He went into the little bits and pieces of his life to the point that even shocked the person he was interviewing. And the point of the discussion is very simple. I think Tom is a phenomenal interviewer, and he's someone that you can get a lot of unique insights on how to make your life better and develop a life worth living. So definitely check out Tom's podcast as well. If there's anything that you take away from podcasts and conversations in general, is that as leaders, as people who want to master communication and share our ideas with the world, it's important to always benchmark ourselves with people who are ahead of us. And what I love about all of these 3 podcasts, whether it's Lewis, Tom, or Reid, none of these people started the podcast to make money. They were already very successful entrepreneurs. They didn't really need to make a quick buck off podcasts. But because of their tenacity to share that information and knowledge with us, that helps us speed up our learning. And I owe a lot of my success to my early days of hardcore podcasting. So by podcasting a bit more in your life, I believe that you'll be more open to new perspectives, new ideas, and maybe a big shift in your life. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of Master Talk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And if you know one person who's interested in podcasts and personal development, be sure to send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to mastering their podcast and their talk. See you soon, everyone. Take care.